All right. As the introduction says, welcome to the Wally Bressler Show. I'm super excited for my guest this week. Look, if you're having trouble with identifying the triggers that are creating a tremendous amount of pain in your life, and you want to learn how to take out the trash, then you're going to want to listen to what our guest has to say today. Welcome, Brian Bogert. How are you?
Wally, man, I'm looking forward to chatting with you today, brother.
Yeah, you got a great story here. Let me just edify you a little here. It says you are a husband and father, human behavior and performance coach, keynote speaker, business strategist, author, 40 under 40, and community leader. What were you the 40 under 40 for?
In Phoenix, Business Journal.
Oh, nice. That's legit. Phoenix is not a small city.
Yeah, no, that was quite an honor. I think that was back in 2012, so that's an old one, but that was fun. I was pretty young on the list.
Good for you. So you're aging us for us. Thank you. Good. It says Brian teaches leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals how to become more aware and more intentional, thus allowing them to become who they already are, their most authentic selves. Brian provides a roadmap to ease the journey of self-realization. He ensures professionals understand the difference in using their time, not in minutes, but with intention, which we're going to talk about in a bit. He opens the door for perspective, motivation, and direction by sharing with leaders how to reprogram their brains, defy their own negative thinking, and how to stop making excuses. When we become who we are, we unlock what is within and leave good enough behind us. Awesome. So I was trying to bring up something a little different with folks when I talk with them. Somewhere I read that you are a member of the invite-only Forbes Coaches Council since 2019, correct. So just about 4 years. Tell me a little bit about that. I think that's a neat little thing there.
Yeah, so somebody had reached out to me, and around 2019, I think I got nominated to be a part of it, and they put us through kind of a little bit of an interview process, and it was a really cool experience because I got invited to join this group that is now, I don't know the exact size, but I think there's about 1,200 coaches that do work both in the human behavior side with business coaching and then the corporate space.
Nice.
That now have an opportunity to network and integrate with each other. And then it gives me a platform to be able to get published through Forbes on a regular basis as well. So I've done a lot of writing for Forbes, and there's a lot of articles out there on the web. And so really, it's just, I'm a big believer in distributing information in a way that people can consume it. It's another medium, it's another outlet, and it reaches a number of people that we actually directly help and serve. And so it's been quite an honor to be a part of that group. I actually just had a re-up with them not long ago, because though I haven't done much writing, they still have provided so much value in terms of the association with that group that I'll probably be a part of it now forever.
Is that a nationwide or a worldwide organization?
It's a worldwide organization, yeah.
So 1,200 people, that's legit. Good for you, man. I think that's awesome.
Thank you, brother.
Cool. Very cool. Nice. So it's all over the internet and everything. So obviously you had an accident as a child, and you know, it's interesting. You think about things that happen as children. You know, our fight or flight instinct gets triggered. A lot of folks go to flight, not to fight. You could have easily become a victim. You could have let that shape your life in such a way where you gave up and turned to something bad, but you did not, which obviously is part of your story. So I'm interested in if you could just, number one, share with us what happened and then how having that happen formulated your philosophy, your belief system. You call it learning how to embrace the pain and suffering. So maybe you could kind of give us a tour of that.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to just say you're, by the way, the first person who's ever asked me about Forbes Coaches Council formally. So I love that you're like, I like to ask a question out of the gate that's different. You already set that expectation, bro. So
I try and be different. You know what I'm saying? I mean, besides looking different, I'm kidding. No, I want people to get to know you a little bit, and you know, I want people to find out more about you. And obviously,
I just wanted to honor you for saying that, bro. It was cool how you started that. So I'd love to take people back to the start. I'm going to paint the picture just for a second. Imagine it was August 10th, 1992. It was a 115-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. It was around 6:00 p.m. Okay. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. And as we were headed back to the car, anyone who's known me for more than about 2.5 seconds knows I walk fast, I talk fast. I've always had a ton of energy.
Right on.
And it wasn't a surprise to anybody that I was the first one to the car. I wanted to get home and put that paintbrush to use. But this was back in the days before there was key fobs. So my mom and brother were still a few feet behind me, and I had to wait for my mom to reach in, grab her keys, stick it in the door, and turn it so we could go on with our way. And in that amount of time, there was a truck that pulled up in front of the store, parked, and the driver and middle passenger got out. Passenger all the way to the right started to feel the truck moving backwards. So Wally, he did what any one of us would do, and he scooted over to put his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas. Combination of shock and force threw him up on the steering wheel, up on the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot, right at us with no time to react. He goes up and over the median, up and over the tree in the median, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to completely sever my left arm from my body.
Oh my God. How old are you again?
I was 7.
How the heck did you live?
And The next thing my mom heard was my brother's voice saying, "Mom, Brian's arm is over there, 10 feet away in the parking lot." Now, I always pause, and I have to always acknowledge that I'm forever indebted to a woman who walked out of the store right when this took place. I call her my guardian angel because she saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her, and she rushed immediately into action. Now, I have to honor this because I got to meet her for the first time last August on the 30th anniversary of the accident.
What?
And the really beautiful part about it is that I learned that she had a friend with her that day who was also a nurse who did not stay, who turned her head and went on her way. And I want to be really clear. I have no hard feelings towards her friend. It's completely within her right. I have nothing there that I have angst about. But what I want to honor is this woman's choice to go into action, to show up, to address the life and limb scenario she saw in front of her is the only reason that I'm here with you today. And that I'm here with you without a cleaned up stump, because she stopped the bleeding on the main wound and she instructed some innocent bystanders to put the detached limb on ice within minutes. Had she not done either of those, I wouldn't be here. So the thing I have to say real quick, and then I'm going to come into some of the lessons part, is here's the reality. I know I have a unique story, Wally.
Yeah.
But what I want everyone listening to understand is that you also have an extremely unique story.
True.
So what's important is, regardless of the extremities of our stories, it's that we learn how to pause long enough to become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories so that we become intentional in how do we apply them in our lives moving forward. And you all have the ability to do that. And you all have the ability to shorten your own curve to learning by tapping into the collective wisdom of other people's stories. And so that's all I want you to hear from today. The shock and awe of my story is one thing, but I never want anyone to minimize the perspective, power, and strength of your own story in comparison to anyone else's, because then it dilutes everything.
I like how you wove the word extremities into that explanation too. It's good. Nice.
Not many people pick up on that, Wally. Look at that.
Little double entendre there. Very nice. So, Dr. Kristen Neff, she's an expert on self-compassion, and she talks about, we both talk a lot about the same thing, which is basically how to get out of our own head and overcome the things of our past so that we can live a great life, and really identifying those triggers and learning how to deal with them. She talks about specifically how we have to actually let the suffering come up and how to let the pain come up to deal with it rather than just stuffing it down with food, alcohol, procrastination, whatever it is. So you had to learn how to embrace the pain and suffering. It's not easy. I mean, when you felt some serious pain, not just physical pain, emotional pain, and now you're growing up as a kid that looks different than every other kid in school. You probably were bullied. I mean, there's a lot of things that you had to endure. You're only 7 at that time. So how did you learn to embrace the suffering? Because it's not easy. Your situation, physically painful, psychologically painful, emotionally painful. So I'm interested in how you work through that.
That's a great question. And even the depth at which you wove into the question just shows your understanding of it.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't ask a question like that unless you've had experience in it yourself. And so here's the reality. All of what you said is true. I felt sorry for myself. I was a victim for about 2.5 seconds, right? But I also learned quickly when I realized that kids laying in the hospital bed next to me had a terminal illness and didn't know if they were going to live for another 30 days. Though it didn't minimize the experience I had, what I did have was my life, right? And so that was true. Now, I will tell you that I had to shut off physical pain because it exceeded my ability to cope. And when I did so, I also shut off mental pain, spiritual pain, and emotional pain for 25 years. So there's a lot of things that took place to get me to a place where I knew how to actually go inside. But what I have to tell you is that is one of the foundational things I learned early was this concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering. Here's what I think is important to describe is that, look, I was in a fog in that period of time. Though I was intentional, though I was aware, though I knew I was the one going through it, right? I was in a fog because I was being guided through the process. My parents, however, were not. They were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments, years of therapy, and the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them.
Sure.
So they literally willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, to do what was tough, to ultimately embrace the pains required to strengthen and heal me. And so whether it was intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me this philosophy and way of living. And I believe that if we embrace pain, we also get to avoid suffering, but that's also when we gain freedom.
Right.
What's important, though, is that people need to understand the dynamics of what this means, right? Because we have to define what pain and suffering is for you to truly understand the depth of this concept. And so what I want to first say is that the world literally tells us to reduce, eliminate, or avoid pain at all costs, right? They tell us to push through and push down, show up with a smile on, right? Like we can't feel. And because the world hasn't taught us to feel or think. It makes sense because it's a natural evolutionary response to survival.
Right.
But we have to update our programming a little bit because 100 years ago, if you cut your leg, you could die. Right? Today, in most first world countries, that's not necessarily the case. And so we have to realize that what our fight and flight response is and how we're being elevated may not actually be the same as we navigate through the current world we live in.
Fair enough.
Pain is defined as short-term, intermittent, a direct cause of something, and alleviated once the direct cause is removed. Then what do? As humans, we screw it up by putting adjectives in front of it, which changes the definition. So we have acute pain, which maintains it, but then we have chronic pain. Now, chronic pain, what I want to highlight is that it implies that it is not short-term,
Right.
and it persists after the direct cause is removed, which, by the way, means it doesn't fit into the definition of pain. It is, by definition, suffering. And one of the things that we talk about deeply, the Latin root to the word suffer means to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's literally the trash from your past that you're carrying with you that you've not unpacked and you've not processed, you've not brought into a place of awareness and ownership to be able to move through it. And so here's the concept in reality, because the unavoidable precursor change is acceptance. Until we accept the current state of things, we cannot alter them, but that's what we want. And we don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. So here's a couple of examples of what this means. You can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. You can embrace the pain of a difficult conversation with a loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of being stuck in a loveless marriage when you really want divorce, or being stuck in a marriage when you really want repair and it's not happening.
Right.
You can embrace the pain of the fit your kids are sure to throw by having them put down their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection and conversation that you'll never get back, right? As business owners, right, we can embrace the pain of firing our top salesperson to avoid the suffering of losing all our other top talent because they were the greatest cancer in our culture, despite the fact that they were contributing the most to the top line. They were destroying everything below it.
Right.
The reality of it is we have to be able to understand the difference between pain and suffering so that we can exist and live in it, because here's what I absolutely know. The singular thing that keeps people stuck, even though they believe it's strategy and tactics. If I find this new system, I find this new process, I make this amount of money, all of a sudden I will have arrived.
Right.
They are incredibly important for leveraging and scaling your life. Systems and processes are important, but they are not what keeps you stuck. Singularly, every single time, it's tied to the trash from your past, which we define as your emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning. And here's one thing I want everyone listening to hear. The trash from your past, the majority of the time, is not your fault.
Almost all of it.
But it does become your responsibility once you become aware of it, or you start burying people in the trash from your past.
Right.
And so that's the concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering, and it overlaps into a lot of other ways that we help people move.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, you're probably familiar with the Will Smith video, Fault versus Responsibility. He talks about that for about 2.5 minutes. One of my favorite videos. So I share that with all my clients because it is true. You know, you brought something up, and I think Brene Brown talked about this. When you numb one emotion, you numb them all. We can't selectively numb pain and sadness and anger and be happy and loving and caring.
Bingo.
Right? So, and I think that's why people are so miserable, because they think that pushing things away that are causing pain to them, they think automatically all this happiness is not going to rise, and the brain just doesn't work that way, you know?
It's a fact.
Yeah. So you said 25 years of avoiding. Were you using procrastination, perfectionism, chemicals, food? What were you using for the 25 years where you pushing pain away?
All of it. I was seeking validation, love, and connection through performance.
Yeah, yes.
I chased the what's of what the world told me to accomplish when I really was in need of who, because I didn't have a healthy model of how to create healthy human connection. Right. What I believed, because when I was 20, I re-broke my arm. I almost lost it again. And when that happened, I went 10 months with it hanging by my side, went through 7 surgeons who were afraid to touch me because of the medical malpractice. And I got into the deepest, darkest depression of my life. But it was also the greatest gift, because what I believed was my transformation story originally, which was my accident. No. That just created a bunch of trash that I buried and shoved so deep. And all of a sudden at 20, when I'm sitting here, it's like the lid got flipped all of a sudden, and I'm exposed in this place where I'm in the most vulnerable, depressed, lonely, isolated period of time that I ever wanted to exist in. And the world also bought into the narrative I'd created the prior 13 years, which was Brian's good, Brian's strong, Brian's capable, and Brian can do anything himself. And the piece that they added, which I never actually said, was, and he'll ask for help if he needs it.
which is
Now all of a
actually
sudden I'm
courage.
sitting in this place, most vulnerable place in my life, and I didn't have the courage to ask for help, brother.
But that is courage, though. People think that being vulnerable is weakness. That's courage.
True strength
That's
it
courage.
hides behind
That's
vulnerability.
courage.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's courage. Not
But I
courage.
couldn't ask for help.
Yep.
And that's what I lacked in that period, because I still had not surrendered to the fact that I needed other people. And that was that lesson that came out, is then human connection. I started to focus on vulnerability and authenticity. But what I also did was decided that if I could get the house, the car, the money, the successful business, right? I was a part of building a successful $15 million risk management employee benefits consulting business over the course of a decade. I don't say that to impress. I say it to impress upon the point that the reality of it is that 27 years old, I woke up and realized that I had all the whats the world had ever told me I wanted, but it cost me the ultimate price, which was who I was. And I'm running in circles with people making multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures in some cases. Our business is multiple millions and growing and scaling at this time. And I started to realize that what I had subconsciously and unconsciously done was numbed all of who I was with alcohol to fit into environments that I believed I should fit into. Ultimately started to create patterns within my life that had a ripple effect back in my home life, causing me to almost lose the 3 people I care most about because of the blindness that I had around it all. And I had to wake up and realize that I was out of alignment, and I'd been chasing the external, subconsciously thinking that if I built a life of significance, people would want to be around me.
They kind of don't, because the more significance you want and crave, the worse it is for people around you, because they're like, oh my God, I got you. I like you. Okay. Like,
that's right. And so all of a sudden I wake up and I realize that I had the equations wrong. Yeah. I was not chasing the right things, even though my heart was desiring those things. I didn't know how to go get them. And so the last 10 years has been a rebuild process in every capacity of my life, because the reality of it is the more I align with who I am, the more all the what's in my world are a manifestation of who I am. And I allow it to manifest in, through, and around me versus all of the resistance that I created. Again, I had deep levels of shame. I had anger buried so deep it could barely be excavated. And I didn't know about it until almost 2 years ago when my wife told me that it caused her to lose who she was. We've had to reinvent and break generational patterns in our house. And so, external numbing, perfectionism, control, scarcity, all of it.
Yep.
I suffered from all of it. And I had to finally learn how to get out of my own way by connecting my head and my heart.
I love that. Yeah. I know I'm going to be in your podcast in a couple of weeks. But I have a similar challenge of not being happy for 50 years and learning how to connect my head and my feelings, because I had basically severed it because it was so painful. So I appreciate that at a high level. I want to get back to a couple more things, but I wanted to bring one other distinction. It's okay to want to be approved of and to want to be accepted and to want to be perfectly normal. We're social beings. We need to be around people. But when that need for acceptance, that need for approval, that need to be included is so strong that it causes us to make bad choices, that it causes us to not love ourselves, that it causes us to stay places and stay in relationships we shouldn't be in, or prevents us from doing what we need to do to be successful, that's when it becomes a huge problem.
Huge.
Makes sense?
And here's the thing. It's funny because if we talk about this from a human experience perspective, it makes sense, right? We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. But here's the funny thing. These last two don't happen unless the first two do, brother. 100%. So if we don't feel safe and protected in an environment that we're in, then what do? We protect ourselves, right? Our armor goes up. So let's imagine I just handed you a 35-gallon black trash bag for one of those outdoor cans, and I'm asking you now to hold it up in front of you like this force field, right? This is your armor. How can you properly portray who you are, what you want, your heart, your intent, your desires, your authenticity, your actual goals for this relationship and connection, and everything you intend through this opaque force field? And how could you ever expect someone on the other side of it to receive you for all of who you are? So here's the thing. We put up our armor thinking we're protecting ourselves, but all we're doing is guaranteeing that we're disconnecting ourselves and that we won't be seen and understood. And so the armor, what we think is protecting us, is taking us further away from who we are and what we want. Right on. Armor does two more things, brother. And I really want to make sure people understand this because it's important from the trash perspective to understand why this happens. It makes sense. It's the human experience to want to protect as well, right? It's hard to stand out there open-faced and exposed in life because of all the criticism, judgment, and shame that's just permeating through our society. And so if we recognize this, we know that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does, brother, if I handed you two 35-gallon bags full of trash and I asked you to hold them out in front of you, how long could you hold them there?
So my arms got tired. So not forever.
Yeah. But what happens is the longer you hold it, the more it's going to burn, the heavier it's going to get, the longer it's there and it's stinky. And guess what? Here's the reality. It's the same thing from the trash from your past. It's the same thing with your armor. The longer you carry it, the more it will incrementally crush you and separate you further and further from what and who you want to be. And the last thing that happens, brother, is there's two types of trash cans in the world, just like there's two types of people. Those with lids and those without, right? Those without lids are like this. An open container, and they're going to push down as much as they can, but ultimately it's going to fill up and it's going to start overflowing, right? It's those people that wear their heart on the sleeve. It's like they're energy vampires. They bring stuff down, and it's like it's just a completely different thing, because what's happening is it's not about empathy and compassion. It's not about vulnerability, because what they're doing is burying everybody in their trash because they're not dealing with it themselves, right? And the second type is those with the lid. That was me. Now, I had a seal on my lid. I had a key on my lid. Mine was locked and the padlock was thrown away. My parents didn't even know how much I was suffering. Nobody was going to see it, right? Because I was armored. But here's what would happen. I'd push down, push down, push down, building pressure and pressure in this bomb that I've created that's going to explode and release trash shrapnel through my world, creating damage that then requires additional energy, time, and resources to create repair around. All because I was trying to protect myself from what? And if we can learn to be the protectors and connectors in our space by dropping our own armor, that means we get to stand with a soft front. Because if somebody's going to be around you and be vulnerable, they don't want to put their head down on a chest plate of armor. A soft front and a strong spine, meaning I've done the work. I've dug deep to become the man in the mirror, to be able to reflect back to people the trash from their past. I know who I am. And so when I can stand there and be open, I can wrap a layer of protection around every environment I'm in, whether it's family, business, life, to ensure that everybody is safe, everybody's protected, everybody's seen and understood, and everybody's protected. But it takes a vulnerable leader to be able to stand in that space. But that's how we change and move people, brother.
You said about 3 mouthfuls right there. It's impressive. It's good stuff. I think, and I want to get on to your assertion that there's a sleeping giant in everyone, but I want to, real quickly, I think what's hard for people to realize is that we actually have a negativity bias to protect us to begin with. Like we're wired to protect ourselves, and it comes via your reticular activator, right? Animals who are usually that are prey, they're looking out for the predators and they want to see things. And so we all have this negativity bias. So we don't get killed. So we don't do something stupid and hurt ourselves. So we're already wired for negativity. So we've got to fight our natural inclination to do that. But it's also what makes it so easy for us to get involved in that, and to really let it spiral quickly and deeply. So yeah, great point. So you said there's a giant in everyone. So a sleeping giant in everyone. I want you to talk a little bit more about what your thought is about that, and why you think people either won't or don't tap into that sleeping giant with limitless potential, I think, as you put it.
Yeah. I mean, it all connects to even what we just talked about. I mean, I'm a genuine believer. Are you a father by chance?
Yes, 4 times over.
Okay. And so you'll understand and resonate with this deeply as well as everybody else. But I genuinely believe that we as people are born as our brightest, most authentic, burning self we will ever be, unless we learn how to move and become, right? Because here's what happens. We come in, we're raw, we're authentic, we're real, we're creative. Everything in the energies are flowing through us. And then what happens? Parents, teachers, employers, and coaches start saying things like this. You shouldn't do that. You should do that. You should want this. You shouldn't want that. You should want this job, this house, this car, this amount of money. You should want to live and exist in this place, and you want to fit inside this box that the world's going to approve of you because of who they've told you who to be, right? And here's the thing. Should is a shame-based word, because it implies that whoever you are or whatever you're doing isn't good enough. And so it's no wonder that so many people constantly second guess and constantly question their authentic voice, their energy, their truth, because from the time they're this big, the world has told them that who they are and what they want isn't good enough. And it's so subtle and so embedded, but it's the truth. And so we start funneling people down this path. And here's the reality. In life, we all experience pain. Every one of us. It's a universal human experience. And for every layer of pain that we experience, whether it's disconnection, abandonment, hurt, like manipulation, extortion, like any of it, what happens? We get pain, and we can choose to either deal with it, look at it, understand it, and move through it, or we just get in a coinciding layer of armor to protect whatever we're trying to hide behind that pain. Mm-hmm. And so often what I tell people is, if you feel like garbage ever, if you feel like trash ever, It's because you have undealt with trash from your past. Those moments that you feel like garbage, you want to avoid. And most people say, well, I don't want to dig through this stuff. Yeah, well, if you want to continue feeling like garbage the rest of your life, keep ignoring the garbage you're still carrying. If you want to find a path to joy, freedom, and fulfillment in your business, in your life, in your relationships, in all of it, then you got to deal with that stuff and remove it, because it's the singular thing that's keeping you stuck. And so for me, I believe that so many people have truly lived their lives based on who the world has told them who to be over who they are and want to be and become. Mm-hmm. And so when I say there's a sleeping giant, what we find so often is that with the highest performers in the world who've even accomplished the external success, the reality of it is often what they really, really, really want, they believe is just out of their grasp.
Right.
They're not going to be able to get it. And at the reality of it is we've got to start shifting perspectives so that people can understand it's not about you seeing Wally and wanting to be like him. It's not about seeing me wanting to be like me. It's not about going and following and becoming just like every one of your influencers that you might follow or be inspired by. No. Mm-hmm. Use what you can from them. Use the perspective that points you what's important from the lessons you can extract from those people. But I want you to unapologetically chase you, which requires dealing with your pain and shedding those layers of armor so you can get back to the core of who you are.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned something on some of the stuff I was doing my research, and I think one of the things that we really both strongly believe in is that it's not going away by itself. You're not just going to automatically wake up one morning and the money fairy is going to show up, or the happiness fairy is going to show up, or the whatever fairy is going to show up. It's just not going to happen. And I think, because we've been through a lot of stuff. I'm sure there were days when you went to bed and you're like, hey, please make my arm stop hurting when I wake up tomorrow. Please, I don't want to drink tomorrow, whatever it is. And, I believe in God, and we pray, and I believe God answers prayers, but God doesn't answer prayer always by giving it to us. Sometimes he just puts us in position to deal with it. But if you don't actually go and resolve the issue and talk about awareness, and we'll bring that up next, but if you don't become aware of what the starting point is of at the beginning of it and then learn how to deal with it, it's only going to get worse. And science has proven this, medicine has proven this, that mental health issues that go unresolved, they create anxiety, it creates depression, and it creates all kinds of issues for people. And eventually you can create PTSD, which if you've ever had PTSD, sucks. I'm sure you had a bunch of it, right? I had it. It's horrible. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it literally, it changes the way you look at everything. So
shocks your nervous system, bro. And it filters everything you see, feel, and understand about the world.
So your PTSD is a way for your brain to protect you, but it's not doing
bingo.
Right?
But that's the thing that I want to expand on too, because you're right. These things, they don't go away unless you put awareness and intention in them. But what I also want to highlight for people is the reality of it is that the depths of these triggers, it's those things that literally when your spouse says that you implied or said you loaded the dishwasher incorrectly, it has nothing to do with your spouse. It has everything to do with your grandma and how they looked at you when you were 4. 100%. Right? And so the reality of it is it's not about the complete removal of these things. It's about living and existing in these things in less and less time of your life. Right? I used to get triggered by shame or anger, and I'd carry it for months. And then it started to be weeks. And the further and further I get, it started to become days. And now it's not that I don't get triggered anymore. It's that I know how these emotions move through my body. I know how they move through my world, which tells me I know how to move through them, because the reality of it is they are adversaries in constant pursuit until the day we die, trying to convince us that what's right in front of us is not what's right in front of us. It's those moments my wife would say, hey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend? And because being a husband and father is my number one role and priority in this world, is the only thing binary in my life, my shame filter would cause me to hear it this way. Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father recently. So what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? And then I'm protecting that. I get defensive. It moves up through my body and I react and I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father. And that wasn't even what she asked.
Right.
And so to your point exactly, it's about living in these things in minutes and moments versus days, weeks, months, or years. I've had clients that have literally carried stuff with them for 40 years and believed that they could not move through it. And then when they did, in as little as 3 to 6 months of intensive, focused work, their life changed instantly. And that's what this is it's about living in minutes and moments, but accepting that we're human and we're trying to recognize that every time we react, the first question to ask yourself is, am I reacting to the trash from my past or what's right in front of me? And I'll bet you 95% of it's the trash from your past, which then allows you to move in that moment to realize, I can drop my armor right now because this has nothing to do with what's right in front of me. What am I protecting?
I'd like to argue for 99% of it is from our past.
I'll go that far. I actually agree with that. I'd say 95 because, I'm not trying to trigger certain people.
You know what? We have no control over what triggers people, so they'll just have to. That's a GTFO moment.
That's
GTFO.
fair.
Right, that's a
That's fair.
GTFO moment right there. So, but the other thing is it's incredible how even just the first 7 years impact our whole lives. And I was that person 50 years to be exact. So I completely get that. And thank you for sharing that. That was really good. So let's talk about awareness and intentionality and the connection between the two. It starts with awareness, realizing that there's something that's happening and that it's in you and likely isn't your fault, but you got to deal with it. And then there's awareness of every time it comes up. Because I have my clients, one of the first things I do is like, okay, let's go find out why you can't get on the phone. Let's go find out where you're a procrastinator, you're a perfectionist. Let's go find out. And people who text me in the middle of the night, fuck you, I can't believe because they're like opening up all these boxes in the attic and like, oh my God, of their brain. And then that emotion comes up because, I think you've probably followed T. Harv Eker before. T. Harv Eker, he talks about TFAR, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Problem is a lot of us avoid the feelings. I know I did: sex, pornography, food, money. And by avoiding this feeling, we never deal with it, which you've been talking about. But if we let that feeling come up and deal with it, eventually it'll go away in a very short period of time, relatively speaking. So, but awareness and intentionality are a huge part of this: beginning awareness and then ongoing awareness and intentionality. So talk to us about that as part of, what you do for coaching and your thought process in that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to be really intentional with it to keep this brief and short because there's so much information out there on awareness and intention.
Yeah, I want what you know. You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to share my thoughts on it because I think it's really important. We cannot be intentional with what we're unaware of. Period. The also truth to this is that most people, when they raise their levels of awareness, just become more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves, which goes completely against the point of understanding why are we raising our awareness. So people feel like victims, they feel like fate, they feel like they have no influence or control of their destinies. Here's the thing, our minds process 11 million bits of information per second. We're only consciously aware of about 40. What that suggests is we're largely living in the unconscious. So until we move the unconscious to the conscious, the unaware to the aware, you're going to be a victim. You're going to have life be fate and you have no influence and control. Right. But when you can start to systematically move those things to a place of awareness, what I appreciate about what you hit on too is that it's not just about awareness on the historical, the sources of these things and how they've shaped you, but awareness in the moment so that you can become the observer and participant in your life real time over time.
And that's really where the intentionality matters, which you are intentionally being aware. Like when it comes up, you're like, oh, there's that anxiety. So I thought you were done. I didn't interrupt you. I apologize.
And so I think it's important to acknowledge that like this is something that we do because when we say we want people to flip their lid and take a scan at what's risen to the top, it's a flip on the idea of most people flip their lids and react. No. We want you to literally flip open your lid and take a look inside to see what's risen to the top. That's awareness. That's where we're going to start to dig. We have this concept of getting people to scan their cans on the daily because if you recognize that every time you go to the trash can and throw this out, that can be a trigger to remind yourself to recall where have been the moments that I've been triggered today and what are the things that we can do to move people through this. And so, great example though, in so much of the coaching that we work with, we can find that someone's dealt with shame, it's impacted them deeply, but then we'll get into a coaching call and they won't have understood how or where they got triggered by getting themselves into a situation in their business that they said yes to something that doesn't align for them. And then unwinding what that looks like through communication for them to be aware and own this. So we'll get moments of awareness where people can say, oh, now I know why I feel that way, but they still don't know or have the tools to be intentional in that moment to communicate it in a way that they can diffuse real time. So there's still some delay and separation between the moment of impact and repair or movement. And so again, what we're trying to get people to do is not just reflect, but to take ownership in the moment. Because it's when we do that we can see what's real. I genuinely believe that this moment right in front of us, it's the only thing real.
True. Very true. Awesome. It says you've done a lot of work with men. Is that kind of, if you look at your avatar, your ideal client profile is, if someone's looking for help and they want to come to you, like, who's looking for you?
So in our one-to-one work or even some of our small group stuff, I would tell you that there's been a really high pattern of high performing type A, hard charging men that may or may not have even identified that way, right? Yeah. They may have actually identified in a different way, but they have a lot of energy. They've had levels of success. And so what I'm helping people do typically is actually get in touch and reconnect with all of who they are. What we find is that myself included, so many people operate intellectually, and that's also a pattern of protection. And we've recently come to be able to find as well that the heart has 500 times the electrical charge to the brain. It has 5,000 times the magnetism to the brain. And there's over 40,000 brain-like cells that exist in our hearts that have cellular memory. And it's been studied and proven that even just intellectually talking about your prior experiences with a therapist doesn't actually allow you to heal and move. It has to be felt in the body, and the emotions have to be associated with it for the cellular memory in your heart to also move. The reason I highlight this is a lot of heart-centered men who want better connections, relationships, intimacy in their business, in their lives, in their relationships, are coming here because they've often felt the heaviness and disconnection from the armor they may not even realize they're carrying. But we have solutions that exist outside of that avatar because we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible by reducing the level of suffering that exists on this planet, largely of which is internal. And so I say that as my avatar for most of the people that coach me one-to-one. It's not always exclusive, but we also have a big belief in having a very low or zero barrier of entry option for people to get the help they need. And so through our challenge in our community, we have 2 solutions there that are very, very low dollar, and many of them have free places involved in them as well. So we do that because we want to help everybody. This is a human issue, not just a high-performing male issue.
Yep. I love that. I've actually taken the same approach. I don't let anybody not get the help they need if they can't afford what I charge. We figure it out because that's the most important thing, is that at the end of the day, they're where they need to be. So I honor that.
All I care about, bro. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to summarize that last part of the conversation is, if you can't feel it, you can't fix it.
If you can't feel, you can't heal.
Okay, that works too, right? Even better, right? But it's not an intellectual pursuit. If you can't feel it, you can't fix it, you can't heal it, right? It's just not an intellectual pursuit, and I think that's a big problem for people. All right, so you are offering a 30-day visit to your community. How people get into your community?
So we literally, you can shoot us a DM. We are going to have information for it on our website very soon because it's been in development for the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. But any way you want to connect with us, we can get you that, and we can send you a link for free 30 days in it. We meet on Zoom 3 times a month, and we've got an app that we built that also is supported through our challenge that keeps people connected and moving in daily, consistent, persistent activities and connecting in our community. So we are truly trying to help as many people move as possible.
Nice. You have a 7-day take out your trash challenge. Tell me about it first. Just tell me exactly what it is first, and then
it's done through an app that we developed. It's a gamified way to create micro content to show people how quickly they can move with a very little investment. It's designed to be done in 10 minutes or less per day. There's coaches corners that have lessons and reflections that will take longer than that, but it's also designed to build connection and community. Mm-hmm. And so we run them every month. Over these last 2 months, we've had over 12,000 positive actions from people to identify and take out their trash. Awesome. We've had well over 2,000 moments of gratitude, and we've had over 1,000 moments where people were able to catch themselves in a response ability versus reacting and blowing something up in their life. It's just been really incredible. We're trying to help people transform, and people have severed relationships with long-term siblings and others.
Yeah, that's the fulcrum of change right there too, is catching yourself at the moment of reaction versus responding. How many people joined this a month, would you say?
We just launched this in January, and we haven't done any marketing around it yet either. So over the course of the last 2 months, we've had 200 people go through the app, and about an 85% engagement rate with the individuals who actually register. Nice. Maintain consistency in it.
And it's one-time $8, correct?
One-time $8. Yep.
If you're watching our show right now, if you're watching the Wally Bressler Show, when you go sign up, the Wally Bressler Show is going to pick up the $8 for the first 30 people that sign up, that say, hey, we saw you on the Wally Bressler Show and we want to take advantage of it. I will pick up the tab for the first 30 people. You just let me know.
That's very generous, brother. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I'll give you my PayPal, whatever, my card. You can just run it because I want to support your effort there for sure.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure. Where is the best place to find you? If people want to find you, where's the best place to find B Square?
You can go to our website, brianbogert.com, or on social, it's @BogertBrian on any channel. We truly engage with those that engage with us. So if you need help, you want to move, any of those channels, we're putting a lot of free stuff out because we really want to help people.
Nice. If somebody wants to work with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, either one of those channels. And then we've got a coaching application process that we would basically put you in then to an interview with me to decide that there's alignment on both sides. So with our one-to-one, we only hold a certain number of spots. It's all of our other group programs that create it. But if they want to work for us, we take applications every month.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So normally I ask people what's a challenge they've overcome in life. You've listed several already. I am intrigued though, and we didn't talk a whole lot about this because an addiction is an addiction is an addiction. You know what I'm saying? Food addiction is a little
True.
tougher because you have to eat every day. I vouch for that. But how were you able to break free of drinking after drinking for so long with all the pain you had? What allowed you to do that?
I started to really pay attention to the energy that would shift in me when I would start to drink, and started to realize that all of the negative parts of me would be amplified under alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it still made me feel like I was more a part of a group. I had more of an edge. I was creating more damage. I felt more included. But I will tell you that I always, fortunately, have had a very high degree of self-discipline. And so there were multiple times, because I always said to myself, if I ever go to a drink consistently because I feel like I need it, then I'm going to stop drinking. And I had done that 2 or 3 times through the process. But I would tell you, in my early 30s, so this is about 5 years ago now, what I actually started to really notice is even as little as one drink that I would never actually feel, I would see a significantly different result in the inflammation and pain in my body for the following as much as 2 weeks after a singular drink. So I started spacing things out and just really putting awareness into like what I was getting out of it. And the reality of it is, though I loved the flavor, it wasn't serving me in my life at all. It was making me have less energy. It was causing more stress. It was creating my triggers and my armor to be even higher. And so when I realized that it truly was taking me further away from where I wanted to go, I just made a decision to stop. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't ever have a drink, but I legitimately probably have 1 or 2 drinks every 2 or 3 months now. And every single time it's the same thing. I'll feel it for 2 or 3 days afterwards, but it's a calculated decision now because I know I'm doing it and I know what the trade-off will be. And so for me, anything that's not additive in my life or lacks depth doesn't exist in my life anymore. There have been a lot of necessary endings, a lot of closures, because that's how we move.
You know, it's interesting too. Like when you live in a fog, when you're addicted to something. I was addicted to food. I was a binge eater forever. It's just interesting how, by being aware and paying attention to things, how much my body hurts now after I eat food, like sugar, especially.
Your body like really does tell you, and if you pay attention to your body, it points you towards what's important.
Yeah, you know, right? I mean, it's no different than having a cut or a fever. You know what I'm saying?
Bingo.
Your body's saying, hey, you got to deal with this. If I want to work with you, how am I going to find you?
Literally website or online on social, like we had said before. So brianbogert.com or at Bogert Brian. We respond to our messages. I respond to my messages directly, and we love to be able to have conversations with people. So just reach out, and there's no expectation. It always starts with a conversation.
Right. And so they can get access to your 7-day challenge to take out the trash on your website. You go sign up, just let them know that you saw it on the Wally Bressler Show, and we'll pick up the tab for the first 30 people. Anything else you want to add?
No, brother. I'll get you all those links so that you can put them in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for creating such an awesome platform for me to pour some good in the world. I'm looking forward to having you on our show as well. So I know this is just the beginning of more collective impact, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability, your willingness to share, your intellect, your experience. I mean, you delivered at such a high level. Super grateful for that. All right, folks, that guy right there is Brian Bogert. I'm Wally Bressler. Be kind to yourself.